able to watch it again, if you can only catch a little bit of it, we will be posting this onto our archived webinars page. We'll show you how you can get to that at the end. Lots of people coming in this morning, so we're going to give them a few more seconds to log in here, and I'm going to hand it off to Dan. Again, we've got people from all over the world. So Tapas in the UK, thanks for joining us. Dan in upstate New York, Frank in Brentwood, wherever you find yourself. We appreciate you tuning in. Dan, here you go.
All right, thanks, Johnny. Is my audio coming through clear there?
Sounds good to me.
Sounds good. Good. Well, thanks for having me today, everybody, and taking time out of your day. Today's webinar is going to be a little bit different than usual. Normally, the tutorials that we do in these webinars are fairly focused on a certain topic, and you'll only see 3 or 4 tutorials during the webinar. This one's a little bit different. We're actually going to talk about some of the, we call them hidden features. They're not hidden. They're just things that some users don't stumble upon that can really make your workflow and your life inside of the suite a lot better. So if you're looking for kind of more of the general tutorial stuff, I would tune into another webinar or go to our video tutorials. If you're a Suite Power user and you want to get some great tips on how to work faster inside of it, this is the right webinar for you. Now, to make this a little bit fun today, I have about a dozen different new tips for the or hidden features for the suite. And if you can keep your own scorecard of how many of them you already knew about, you'll know exactly how much of a power user you are. All right, so the first one I'm going to talk about is actually the Preferences dialog. When you open up the suite, you can open the Preferences. On a Mac, it's under the Perfect Photo Suite menu. On Windows, it's under Edit. And there's all sorts of really great options in this Preferences menu. When you open it up, you can pick the working color space that you want to work in. So when you open documents that don't have an embedded color space, this is the color space that it's going to default to. Another really handy control is this scrolling controls pop-up. Normally it's set to none, which means if you have a mouse with a scroll wheel or you have a touch-sensitive surface like a touchpad, the scrolling behavior, whether it's up or down or left or right, won't do anything. But from this pop-up, you can set that scrolling behavior to adjust things like the size of the brush. So you can scroll your mouse wheel up or down to make the brush bigger or smaller. I like to set mine to preview pan because I work oftentimes with either a magic mouse, which lets me scroll up or down or left and right, or I work with the trackpad. And with the preview set to pan, once I'm zoomed in, I can move around my preview just by moving my finger on the top of the mouse. Another one that's great is this preview background color pop-up. This lets you control the color in the preview area, this dark gray area. You notice mine is set to custom. I pick a really dark gray that I like to use, but you can also use white or black or lighter dark gray. I think the regular dark gray is the default setting for that. The next tab I want to talk about is the Lightroom Plugins tab. If you're a Lightroom user and you use the Perfect Photo Suite through Lightroom, this tab controls the behavior of how the suite and Lightroom talk to each other. It controls the file type that you're going to work with outside of Photoshop or outside of Lightroom. So for example, if you're a JPEG shooter and all you want to do is work in JPEGs and you don't care about saving raw files, you can set your file type to JPEG. And every image that Lightroom sends to the Perfect Photo Suite will be a JPEG. We'll do our work on that JPEG. We'll save it and close it, and we'll give it to you back as a JPEG file. It'll still be a copy, so the original file is safe. Or the default is to use a PSD file. That means that no matter what you have inside of Lightroom, we're going to create a new layered Photoshop file out of it. That way we can keep track of all the layers, and you can always go back and edit those layers independently in the future. But the last one, and here's the secret one, this is the one we get the extra points for, is the Performance tab. The Performance tab lets you tell the suite how much memory, both regular memory and video memory, you want to give to the suite. By default, both of these are set at about 50 because we don't know how much of both of these resources you have on your computer. But if you use the suite on its own or with other applications, you're not using it as a plug-in to Photoshop, where Photoshop tends to suck up a lot of memory on your computer, and you're using a more modern computer, one that has at least 256 megabytes of video RAM, you can max both of these guys out to 80 and 80, and this will make your performance inside of the suite a lot faster. It'll allow it to use more memory, and it'll allow you to use more of the video RAM. And the more of the image that we can put in the video RAM at any given time, the quicker the suite is going to be able to perform, especially in operations like zooming in and zooming out or changing things like that. So give yourself a point if you've ever adjusted your performance settings here inside of the suite. All right, before I jump out of preferences, Johnny, are there any questions on this?
At the moment.
Okay, cool. The next one we're going to talk about, and actually let me just show you one quick tip. If you go to the view menu, you can also change your preview background color right here. So you can change it. Let's say I want to use a white preview area. I can just select white back there, and it'll flip over to white. I tend to like a dark one, so I'm going to go back to dark gray.
Quick question though, a couple questions have popped up in regards to the preference settings that it's Lightroom specific. Any reason why it's not Aperture, why there's not Photoshop in there?
So those are both good questions. Let me just open it up here so we can have something interesting to look at while we're talking about it. With Aperture, we don't actually have the ability to tell Aperture what we want. Aperture gives us whatever you tell Aperture inside of Aperture's preferences. And the way it works is a little bit different. What I really recommend, if you are a Lightroom user or an Aperture user, we have dedicated learning centers on our website, which actually have videos just for Lightroom and Aperture users, and it has both of them have a great document about how the file handling works in both of those environments, because they do vary a little bit between each other. So I would definitely go to those learning centers, download those PDFs, and it'll explain exactly how all the settings work across those guys.
Thanks, Dan.
And with Photoshop, we actually don't get the whole image anyway. All you get is just whatever the one layer is that you had in Photoshop selected. So we just kind of get just the bits for that layer, exactly how they are. We work on just those bits and give it back to Photoshop. And Photoshop takes care of all the other stuff for you.
Excellent. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'm just going to open an image. And the next thing I want to talk about, this is really handy if you're a laptop user. As the browser on the left takes up space, which can be images or presets, and the right-hand side, all the controls take up space, it means you have less and less space to actually view and work on your image. So you give you the ability to close these panels on the left and the right. And you can do this with if you're on a Mac, it's the Command left and Command right arrow. If you're on a Windows computer, it's Control left and Control right. So if you want to get rid of this browser over here on the left, you just hit Command or Control left, and it'll roll that browser up and gets it out of the way. And press it again to open it. Same thing on the right, Command right arrow to close the controls on the right. Or if you want to get rid of both of them, and this is what I'll typically do, is I just hit the Tab key. So the Tab key on your keyboard will hide both of those, and it goes to kind of a full screen mode where you don't see all of those controls. You'll still see your tools, so you can select and change tools while you're working, and you'll still see the tool options bar, so you can change the settings for that tool, so you can really do a lot of the work at any given moment without having to have those control panes open. And you can also make it completely full screen. So over here on the upper right hand corner on a Mac, there's a little full screen button. You can also access this from the window menu and select full screen. This works on a Windows computer as well. It just won't have this these little arrows in the corner. You'll just go to the window menu and select full screen. And this will let the suite take over the entire screen. So the menu bar is hidden, and any of the stuff at the top is hidden. So you see just the suite. And when you mouse to the top, you can then turn that full screen mode off. All right, so give yourself another point if you knew about full screen mode in the suite. All right, next one we're going to talk about is the browser on the left-hand side. With the browser, it gives you the ability to browse files here inside of layers. Now, if you don't use any other browsing tool, this can be a really handy thing, but it's even handy if you use other tools like Lightroom or Aperture to manage your files. One of the limitations of both of those is you can only have one catalog open at a time, and if you shoot a lot of images, you tend to have multiple catalogs, probably one for each client or maybe for each genre or each year. But that always means that there's some content that you might not be able to get to. You might have things that you like to use all the time, like your textures or your logo that you want to add. You can always browse that content here inside of the suite and still add it as layers on top of an image that you sent to the suite via Lightroom. All right, to use the suite, or to use the browser, it will remember the last folder that you browsed. In this case, it's automatically remembered. I was looking at the onOne samples, which are images that we install automatically to give you a few images to start with. And a lot of our video tutorials use these images so you can follow along. But to change what you want to browse in here, you go to the File menu and you select Browse. And this sets the top level of the browser. Now, the great thing about this is if you have a network volume or you use a service like Dropbox or Google SkyDrive or Microsoft SkyDrive or Google Drive or any of those cloud-based services that keep a copy of the content on your computer, you can browse those as well. You can also browse a USB or a FireWire or a Thunderbolt drive you plug into your computer this way. So you can pick exactly where you want to start. I'm going to go to my demo images that I'm going to use today. So there we go. I just select the path to the folder that I want, and it'll now reset the browser to that. And you can see that path right here in this demo images pop-up. It'll show me exactly where that folder is that I'm browsing, and I can go up or down in this as I navigate through my folders. The other really handy thing in the browser is the Extras tab. A lot of people don't know that when you install the suite, all of the backgrounds and all of the borders and all of the textures that you have access to inside of modules like Perfect Effects or Perfect Mask or Perfect Black and White are also accessible to you as individual layers here inside of Layers. So you just click on the Extras tab and you notice that there's categories for backgrounds and borders and textures. And I can add those and do my own work here inside of Layers. Let's go grab a different image real fast here. I'm going to go back to my browser and let's find a different image to work on. While we're here, let's talk a little bit about the Quick View browser. The Quick View browser is brand new in Suite 7.5, and if you've been in webinars lately, you've probably heard us talk about it a little bit, but it is probably the coolest new feature in the suite in the last year. It allows you to get a full screen preview of not just your files, but also your presets that you're working with. And you can access the Quick View browser just by clicking this little button right here, the Quick View browser button. You can see it on each folder, and there's also one down here in the bottom of the browser. When you press this, it's going to take over your screen, and you're going to see thumbnails that represent the images or the folders. In this case, these are the folders inside of that folder I was looking at. You see they have a little folder in the corner. We just give you the first image in the folder so you can kind of see what the contents are inside of it. Now, here's the tip on the Quick View browser. You can use your keyboard to navigate it, which makes it really fast to go up and down inside of folders and find just the content you're looking for. So the first time you hit an arrow key, once the Quick View browser comes up, the first item becomes selected. You can then use your arrow keys to navigate through that Quick View browser. If it's an image, you hit return, it's going to open that image. Or if it's a preset, it'll apply that preset. In this case, I want to go inside of that folder. So if I hit the enter key, it's going to dig down inside of that folder. And we can always see that up here in the top on this little breadcrumbs trail. It tells us where we're at within that folder structure. If you hold down the command or the control button and you hit the left arrow, it will go back up a level. So it lets you go back up the folder tree. All right, let's grab an image to open here. I'm going to open a new image, and let's show you how to use some of that built-in extras content. I'm going to go to the extras, and I'm just going to add a texture. So I'll click on the Quick View browser button. When I do that, I'll see all of the categories of textures. These are the subfolders inside of that textures folder. You notice there's one for fabric and metal and natural and paper and walls and et cetera, et cetera. I'm just going to arrow over to the paper category. I can hit return, and now it shows me all of the different paper textures. These are all the ones that are installed with the suite automatically. I just go through and pick one that I want to use. Oh, let's say we're going to use this one right here, this dark rice paper. I hit return, and I can add this as a layer inside of Layers on top of my image, and then go to the blending mode pop-up, and now I can just use my arrow key to mouse through those blending modes to find one that I like. You get a live preview of those blending modes. That's another great little hidden secret in the Perfect Photo Suite, is that you live preview the blending modes. You don't have to pick the blending mode and let go like you'd normally have to in Photoshop. So there we go. I like that overlay blending mode. I'll just hit return to set that. Oops, there we go, didn't stick. All right, so that covered a couple different topics. We talked about the browser how to set the folder that you want to browse in it, how to use the new Quick View browser, and about the extras content inside of Perfect Layers. We'll give you 3 points if you knew about all 3 of those things. All right, Johnny, any questions before we move on?
Pretty good, but a quick question on performance. When we were talking about the performance preferences that you had set up, does changing those from 50% up to 80% when you're working with specifically with Photoshop, does that give any advantage?
It kind of depends on your system. Because Photoshop does like to have a lot of memory, you're basically fighting with it for whatever's available, and it kind of depends on who started first as to who's going to get more of that memory. Uh, what I would probably do is do some timing experiments on your own, on your configuration, to kind of get a feeling for how it's going to work with your use along with Photoshop. If you work with normal, moderate-sized images with not a lot of layers in Photoshop, and you've probably got 8 or more gigs of RAM, you can probably set it up and be fine. But if you work on really big images or images that have lots of layers, or you have a smaller amount of RAM, then I would probably keep it at 50%. That way you're kind of sharing the resources between the two better. Because whenever
Excellent.
one of them runs out of RAM, both of them are going to have to go to the hard drive to make up for that RAM, and that's when they're both going to start to slow down.
Excellent. Cool. Thanks, Dan.
You bet. All right, so next thing we want to talk about are just keyboard shortcuts in general. We've talked about a couple useful ones for navigating in the Quick View browser and for opening and closing the panels on the left and the right-hand side. But keyboard shortcuts, or some people call them keyboard accelerators, are a great way to really make the program you're using a lot faster. And we always try to match whatever the keyboard shortcuts are for the Adobe apps, for Lightroom and for Photoshop. And that's because those are the apps that we all use every day. So it's great when the keyboard shortcuts you use there match what you do in the suite. There's a couple different ways that you can find out what those keyboard shortcuts are. The first thing to do is just go to the menus. And when you click on any of the menus at the right-hand side, it'll show you what the keyboard shortcut is for the command that you want to use. And that's great if it's something that has a menu command, but not everything has a menu command. For example, making a brush bigger or smaller, there's not a menu command for doing that. So you can go to the Help menu, and you can bring up the Keyboard Shortcut Inspector. And this pops up a little dialog that shows you all of the keyboard shortcuts for the application that you're using. So if you knew that keyboard shortcut dialog was there, give yourself a point. You can also oftentimes find out keyboard shortcuts just by hovering over something. So if I hover over a brush or a tool, at the end of it, it'll tell me what the keyboard shortcut is. So if I wanted to select the masking brush, I would hit the B key. Or if I wanted to change the size of a brush, if I mouse over, it'll tell me I can use the bracket keys. So let's talk about how to change the brush a little bit. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to set this mask to grayscale so we can see this a little bit better. In the tool options bar at the top, you have options for size, feather, and opacity on just about any tool that is a brush. So whether it's the masking brush or the brushes in Perfect Mask or in Perfect Black and White. You can control all of these settings with keyboard shortcuts. The most obvious one, the one that most of you guys know, is that you can use the bracket keys on your keyboard. So the right-hand bracket key will make that brush bigger, and the left-hand one will make it smaller. But you can also change the feather and the opacity, doing the same thing just by holding down modifiers. So here I am with a small brush, and I can hit my bracket key a couple times, and now I have a bigger brush. I can change the feather of the brush by holding down the Shift key and then using those bracket keys as well. So right now my feather is 25, and you can watch this right up here in this little feather indicator. If I hold that Shift key down and I use the brackets, I can make my brush have less feather, so it's a harder edge. Or if I go the opposite direction, I can hold Shift and right bracket, and I can make a really soft brush. And these can all be controlled on the fly. You can also do the same thing with opacity. If I hold down the Option key and I change those brackets, I can decrease the opacity of that brush. And of course, if you use a Wacom tablet, you can control it with the pressure sensitivity of your tablet just by checking the little W's at the ends of controls that have a W, and that means the harder you press, it'll change the size and the opacity of the tool, or just either or, depending on which ones you configure on. Another handy one is you can temporarily change the mode of a tool. by holding down the Option key or the Alt key on your keyboard. So for example, right now I'm painting in black. If I hold down the Option key, I'm painting in white, only while I hold that Option key down. So if you make a mistake, it's a very quick way to temporarily toggle the tool to the opposite color so you can clean up your mistake. Or the X key on your keyboard will change the mode permanently. It'll change it from paint in to paint out with the X key. All right. Any more questions on brush keyboard shortcuts?
No, those are pretty good.
Doesn't sound like it. I do want to show
somebody wants to see the keyboard shortcut again for that main menu. Where was that?
For the main menu, for the
for all the
keyboard shortcuts, you go to the Help menu and Keyboard Shortcuts, or it's Command Shift or Control Shift K will pop up that little keyboard shortcut HUD as well. This is also in the user guide, so you can always go to the user guide and there's a page for the keyboard shortcuts where we'll list all of them as well. And they'll be sensitive to whether you're on a Mac or a Windows computer, so it'll change those keyboard shortcuts for you automatically.
And to clarify for you PC users, when we're on Macs, and the Command key translates to the Control key on the PC.
Yep, and the Option key will translate to the Alt key. And I always try to say both, but sometimes I forget, so just remind me if I miss one.
Yeah, so that's the Alt key. Then again on the PC, that's come up as well. So thank you, Dan.
One more tip on brushes, and that is you can make a brush draw a straight line for you by holding down the Shift key. So if I wanted to draw a straight line from top to bottom on this image, if I did it normally, I could try really hard to draw a straight line, but you notice that even though I'm paying attention, it drifts a little bit. It's not really a straight line. If you want to draw a straight line with a brush tool, and this is really any brush tool in the suite, start by clicking, making a dot to set your origin point. Then go to where you want the straight line to end at the bottom of the screen, hold down the Shift key, and click again. And it'll draw a perfectly straight line connecting those 2 points together. So rather than just a dot and a dot, it'll draw a line between the 2 dots. This is really handy if you're trying to trace around a geometric shape, or if you're working on an architecture shot where you've got hard edges on buildings. Rather than having to paint very carefully along that edge, you can just click and shift click, and it'll paint the whole edge of the building all in one stroke. All right. Let me go back to my notes here. Give yourself a point if you knew that you could change the opacity and the feather of the brush using keyboard shortcuts.
Quick question, Dan. In regards to Wacom compatibility, we are compatible. I can tell you that. You want to explain the W up in the toolbar and how we work with the Wacom tablet?
Sure. Actually, let me just plug a tablet in here real quick, and I'll show you how it works.
So lots of great questions. Thanks for asking these as we're going along. There are some that I will not answer. I'll come back and try and answer at the end here that aren't relevant to what we're discussing at the moment. So thank you, everybody, though.
All right. So I just
question: Why do you? Here's a good one. Why do you prefer using a mouse versus a pen?
It really depends on what I'm working on and how long I'm going to be working on it. So in general computing, where I'm checking my email and I'm writing a document and I'm doing something in the suite, I tend to use a mouse because I think as a general purpose pointing device, it's a little bit easier because I can let go of my mouse and it just kind of stays there. I don't have to go pick up a pen each time I want to do something with the mouse. Now, that said, the newer Wacom tablets are actually touch sensitive, so you can actually use the whole tablet like a giant trackpad as well. If it's one of the newer touch-enabled ones. And to be honest, I just haven't got myself over the hurdle of actually using it in that way. But you could totally do that. So I'm just kind of an old school guy, so I tend to still use my mouse most of the time. Now, if I'm sitting down and I know I'm going to be doing a lot of retouching, I'm going to be doing several images in a row, and I know it's going to be tricky stuff, then I'll pull out my Wacom tablet and I'll definitely use it for that because it does make things faster, especially when you're doing anything that requires natural feathering. When you're trying to blend something in, the tablet's going to make that a lot faster to do because you can accomplish that in 1 or 2 strokes, where you'd have to do it with a mouse. You have to lower your opacity down to make many strokes to make it look natural. Hopefully that made sense.
Excellent.
All right, so let's talk about how to actually use your tablet with the suite. So right now I've got the Wacom toggle turned off for both. So if I was to make a brush stroke, I'm just going to make my brush size a little bit bigger here so it's easier to see. If I was to make a brush stroke, I'm just going to get one big brush stroke. Let's actually undo that. I'm just going to turn the feather way down so we have a hard edge so it's easier to see this. So I would just get one big, boring 1,000 pixel wide brush stroke. Let me undo that and let's show you what happens when you turn the Wacom toggle on for size. Now it's going to vary the size depending on how hard I press with a maximum size of whatever I have set in this slider. So whatever's in the slider is the cap for that at that given moment. So if I have it set to 1,000, no matter how hard I press, 1,000 is the biggest that brush is ever going to get. But if I start really gentle, so right now I just barely have it touching the surface, I'm only getting like a 40 or 100 size brush. And as I start to brush harder and harder and harder, you'll see how the brush size gets bigger and it lets me create an even larger brush stroke. So it lets you control how big the brush is based on how hard you press. Let's undo that for a moment. And now I'm going to turn that off and I'll show you how it works with the opacity. Opacity works the same way. Now, no matter, let's make my brush just a touch smaller. As I start to paint, it's going to start a very low opacity. It's more like a 3 or 4% opacity. You can just barely see it doing anything. And as I start to press harder and harder and harder, it's going to continue to increase that opacity and make it heavier and stronger. Now, this is the mode that I will typically use the tablet in. I want it to change the opacity based on how hard I press. So if I'm, for example, I'm retouching skin inside of Perfect Portrait and or inside of Perfect Layers, I want to make sure that on the gentle areas, I'm using a low opacity so I can paint very gently to get the results where maybe I'm working on like an eye bag underneath an eye where I want it to be much stronger. I can just press harder in that area to retouch it. And of course, you can turn both of these on at the same time where it'll change the brush size and the opacity. I haven't found too many cases where I like to do that, although I have heard from more of the natural media artists that this is a common way to configure things. So as I press harder, it will get bigger and more opaque at the same time. All right. Any other questions on the tablet?
No, that's pretty good.
Cool. All right. Let me take a peek here at my notes and see where we're at. I'm just going to turn my mask view back to all layers. And I just want
quick question. Being that you're touching on that, somebody had a question about, using that tab. Where you have the all layers and grayscale.
Let's come back to that one, and I'll talk about it with a different image a little bit later, where it'll make more sense. You can see what's going on better. What I want to do now is hit a couple more keyboard shortcuts that are the most common ones that hopefully everybody knows and uses, because these are the ones that, in my opinion, make things the fastest. And these are the ones for actually navigating the preview. So you can use the Command plus and minus, or Windows Control plus or minus, to zoom in or zoom out. And for me, I do this all day long for zooming in and zooming out. You can also do the Command or Control 0 to have it fit to full screen, or you can do Command Option or Windows Control Alt 0 to zoom into 100%. Of course, you can always get to these by using the keyboard shortcuts or the little buttons here in the bottom of the navigator. You can go from fit to 100 very easily right there as well. And when you're zoomed into 100, no matter what tool you have selected, you can always hold down the space bar to temporarily change your tool to the pan tool, so you can reposition what's in your preview window, let go of the space bar, and it'll turn back to whatever tool you had selected. All right, so those navigating the preview keyboard shortcuts will save you a ton of time. It doesn't mean you ever have to switch over and select the hand tool or the zoom tool. I pretty much never select these tools because you can do it all with keyboard shortcuts with any tool that you have selected. All right, cool. Let's talk a little bit now about the perfect brush. Let's go find an image for us to work on. I'm just going to use the old Quick View browser. Let's go find an image. Let's use this one. You can see how quick it is to find and open an image with that Quick View browser. Super fast. All right, so some of you guys have heard about the Perfect Brush already. For those of you who haven't, this is a great quick tutorial on how to use the Perfect Brush. Perfect Brush is new, I think, in Suite 7.5, and it's an enhancement to the masking brush. So for example, on an image like this, if I wanted to paint out this sky, I want to mask it to basically make a selection of everything except for the sky. Normally I'd have to paint through here. You see that checkerboard pattern, that means transparency. That's the part that I'm masking away. As I'm painting along here, when I get to that edge of the trees or the edge of the horizon, I would have to zoom in really, really close, and I would have to paint incredibly accurately to try to paint that away and make it look smooth. You see all these tiny little trees? It would take me forever to go through and mask this out with a regular brush. I'd end up probably going to perfect mask in doing it, but we've added this option right here called the perfect brush, which makes this a lot faster. So turn the perfect brush on, and you can turn it on by using the Command R or Control R keyboard shortcut as well. And now as we paint along this edge, watch, I'm going to bring my brush down so that the brush is actually touching the foreground. As I paint, it's leaving the foreground there for me automatically, and it's only painting away the blue color. And it does this by looking at the color underneath the center of the brush. So you see there's that little minus crosshair. That's the color that it's going to paint away as the brush moves. So as long as there's a color difference between my foreground and my background, it'll just paint away just the colors that I want. I'm going to go around the tree, and we'll talk about another little handy tip with the tree in just a minute. There we go. Let's get rid of the rest of the sky here. I'll just use a bigger brush. We'll paint away the rest of the sky. Now, when you have something like the tree, you don't want to brush all the way through it. Let's zoom in a little closer here so we can see this. So if I was to try to just brush through the tree, as it's brushing through, you see it's getting rid of the blue. The second that the center of that brush touches that green tree branch, oh, it's going to start painting away tree. I don't want that to happen. I want to protect the tree and only get rid of the blue that's behind it. So we added the option to have it stop sampling the color. So like I mentioned, as I move the brush, whatever's underneath that little minus symbol is the color that it's painting away. So it's painting away blue, painting away blue, painting away blue. As soon as I hit the green, it's going to start painting away green. What I want to do is I want to tell it, stop sampling. Just remember the blue, the last color that you're working on. You can do that by holding down the Command key or the Control key. And as long as you have that held down, it'll stop sampling that color. So I'm just painting along. I hold down my Command key, and watch. Now as I paint through the tree, it's just painting away blue, and it's leaving the greens and browns and oranges in the tree, just like that. All right, so there's another great tip right there. And give yourself a point if you knew that you could stop the sampling of the perfect brush by holding down the Command key on Mac or the Control key on Windows. All right, any questions on the perfect brush out there, Johnny?
Comment, somebody says, perfect brush is awesome. It's one of my faves.
That's good. Always like to hear that. Now, some of you guys are asking, well, why the heck would you want to do this anyway? Why would I want to paint away this sky? I'm not really painting it away. I'm hiding it. A mask is the way that you make a selection inside of the suite so that you can affect only a small portion of an image. I'm going to do a very dramatic example for you guys here. Let me just make a copy of this image on the bottom. And I'm just going to reset its mask so that we can see everything. And I'm going to go in and I'm going to work on this layer that has the mask in any of the modules. If I go into, let's go to Perfect Effects. And like I said, I'm going to do this as a very obvious change so you guys can see it. I'm just going to add a black and white. You'll notice that the black and white is applied to just the part of the image that is unmasked. So it's only applied to the foreground. The sky is left protected. This gives me a way to target just very small areas of the image. Now, the really cool thing about this is even though it looks like it's only applying to the foreground, it's actually applying to the whole layer. And if I hit apply, let's just go back here real quick. If I hit apply, it's actually on the entire layer, and it's just the mask that's hiding it. And if I use my masking brush and I change it from paint out to paint in, and I start to paint in that sky, you'll see how it starts to paint that black and white effect in up there as well. So I can always go back and I can fine tune things if I need to after the fact. This concept of taking masks and you working with multiple layers through the different modules of the suite is really powerful. I'm going to show you a couple more examples of what you can do with that. And it doesn't have to be replacing a background. It could just be changing parts of the image. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to jump out of here and we'll grab a different image so I can show you more what I'm talking about. I'm going to go back to my quick view browser here and let's go find an image to work on. Here we go. Let's use this one. All right. I like this shot, but I really want this sky to be even darker and more grungy, foreboding color. And if I went into Perfect Effects, I could do that, and I could use the brush to paint the effects in or out. But it's going to take me time to do it. And especially with tough stuff like her hair, it's going to be hard to make it look realistic. So I'm going to go into Perfect Mask, and we're going to make a copy where we mask out everything but her. So I've got this layer. We'll go to Perfect Mask, and you're going to get some tips in Perfect Mask here at the same time.
While this is loading up, a question about using the perfect brush in layers versus how does it compare to the magic brush in mask?
Good questions. The perfect brush is going to be very fast. It only samples one given color at a time and just paints away that one color. And as long as there's a good difference between your foreground and your background and your subject isn't really transparent, it'll do a great job. So it's good for the most common things. And that's why we put it as an option to the masking brush that you can use pretty much anywhere. You can use it in portrait and in layers and in mask and effects. If you have more complex things, that's where you would go and use Perfect Mask. That's actually why I'm using Perfect Mask here, because it's going to be faster to do it in Perfect Mask. And if I have something that's semi-transparent or a really, really fine detail like hair or a wedding veil, Mask will do a better job as well, because it has the ability to assign both keep and drop colors. You can tell it what you want to keep and what you want to drop instead of just what you want to drop. So it'll do a better job. All right, so here's the tip for mask. Whenever I go into mask, the first thing I do is I change my view to segments. And I want to see the segmentation of the image. When you load mask, what it does is it analyzes the image and it breaks it down into little chunks that are around the same color and the same texture. And this drives the drop brush, which is the default tool that's selected. It's the one that paints away the big chunks at one time. By going to the segment view, it lets you see what those segments look like. And what I'm looking for is two things. I want to make sure that the areas I want to get rid of have started to coalesce into big segments. And in this case, it's done a great job. The sky is pretty much one segment with a couple little islands that are left over. The second thing I want to do is I want to make sure that I have a good separation of my subject from the background. I want to make sure that the background isn't leaking into my subject as well. You can control this segment size right here with this segment size slider. I'm going to turn it way down to 1 so you can see what it looks like if I create too many segments. So here, the sky is broken down into way too many chunks. And if I start to paint, it's going to take me all day to tell it that all those chunks I want to get rid of. You notice I still have a nice definition on the edge of my subject. If I bring it up too high, let's say I bring it up to like 30, now you notice that the sky is close enough to the color of her shorts that those areas are starting to collapse away. These segment sizes are too large. So what you want to do is find a good balance of the two. You want to find one where the edge of your subject is maintained, but your background is made up of as few segments as possible. And we'll try to do that for you automatically. I think we set a segment size of like, it's 8 to 12. It's usually a good place to start on most images, but this will let you adjust that. All right, so once you've set that segment size, now we can go back to our normal view, use my drop brush. I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger, and then you just paint through the stuff that you don't want. So I just paint through my sky, and watch here in like a single brush stroke, it's going to get rid of almost all of my sky. And it's done a good job of feathering all of those edges at the same time. All I have left are a couple little pockets right in here. I've got one right in here that I want to get rid of, and one right in here that I want to get rid of. Now, an earlier question that I said I'd address in a minute is where we were talking about being able to view the masks. And here's a great place to talk about that. Here we have the mask view pop-up in the bottom. And from this, you can select how you want to view your image or the mask that's on that layer. So right now I have it set to all layers. That means it's going to show all the layers in my layers palette from layers that are turned on. I can also go through and I can look at the before view, which will show me what it looked like before I've done any masking. This is a good for a comparison tool. Or any of the ones that start with mask, let me actually view what the mask looks like. The mask grayscale is the most common one. That's the one that we're used to seeing. But there's also one for a red overlay, which would be like a ruby lift mask. This is a hypercritical one. And then there's also one that will show it against a darker background or against a white background. What I like to do is I'll set it to that grayscale mode, and then I'll change to a split screen preview. Oops, let's actually put the mask over here on the left. I'll put my after, my all layers on the right. This lets me compare my image and my mask at the same time. It lets me look for flaws in my mask, but then tells me where I need to operate on them to clean them up. So you notice I've got a couple little ghosties in here on the inside of this arm that I need to clean up. I'll just grab the regular masking brush. That's a little too big here. And now I can just paint those little guys away, and I know exactly where they're at. I know where I need to stop because I can see both at the same time. And one of the other dirty secrets about masking is masks don't have to be perfect in a lot of cases. They just need to be convincing. So I'll actually view with my new background behind on the right-hand side, and I can see just the flaws that I need to worry about cleaning up. All right, I'm going to apply this. We'll go back to layers, and I'll show you now how handy this can be. I'm just going to make a copy of this. So I've got a version of her separated from the background, and I've got below that a version of her without the mask. I'm just going to turn the mask off by going to the masking tool and hitting the reset button. So there we go. If I turn that upper layer off, you don't see any difference at all. They look just the same because we have really just her separated on that own layer. Now, on that bottom layer, if I was to go somewhere like Perfect Effects, for example, as I work on the image, I'm only going to see the stuff on the layer that I have selected and unmasked. So I want to make these clouds stronger without affecting her. I want to add something kind of grungy. Let's go down to my grunge category here. Let's take a look at the options. I want kind of a heavy, dark grunge. Let's just go with good old-fashioned grunge. There we go. Now you notice when I added that grunge filter, it had no effect on the foreground at all. Let me turn the preview on and off. I'm just going to turn the eyeball on the layer off. So there's before and after with that grungy looking sky. Let's say I want to make that even stronger. I'm just going to add another layer, and let's go back into our grunge category and let's pick something even darker and more fierce than that. Let's go to maybe Grunge Goddess 2. There we go. And you can see how I can stack those up and have it only affect the sky without affecting my foreground. All right, any questions on using masks that you create in Layers or Perfect Mask to drive your workflow inside of other modules?
So quick question in regards to if you jump back into mask, you know how you
Cancel
were
out here real
using
fast.
the drop tool.
Mm-hmm.
When would you use the drop tool versus say using just the remove background button?
Okay. Let's actually go into mask so we can talk about that. And actually, I will reset this mask really fast. And I'll kind of show you the differences here. So go ahead, Johnny.
I was just going to say lots of positive feedback. People are impressed.
Well, good. Good. So what the remove background button does is it basically takes the drop brush and it kind of automatically strokes the image with it. And as long as you have a fairly consistent background on at least 3 sides, clicking that remove background button will do a pretty good job. It's pretty instant, but it requires that you have a fairly consistent background. This was put in for photographers who work in a studio and shoot their subject on a solid color background. So if you're shooting on a white background or a gray background, or you're shooting green screen or blue screen, you can just click this remove background button and it'll pretty much do the whole mask for you. On an image like this, where if we look at our segmentation again, where the background is fairly consistent, clicking that remove background button will probably work out all right as a good start. So let's click on remove background and it will just do it for me automatically. Oops, I have a layer that's on above it, so we're not going to see the right thing. Hang on a second. Let me cancel and go back and select the right layer, or you're not going to see the results.
So this is something that we see a lot in technical support. Always make
There we
sure
go.
you're on the correct layer that you're going to be removing the background from. And if you did have a duplicate image of it below, you want to make sure you turn that little eye icon off. Otherwise, you wouldn't see any change.
Yeah, there we go. So now we're back in mask. I click that remove background button. It'll paint that all away. And you can see it did a pretty good job. There's a little bit of a ghosty right here that I would remove, and the little pockets inside here. But if we did this instead, let me just undo that. Let's go to our segment view. And let's say that the segmentation actually turned out that there were a very complex background. If I tried to hit the remove background button now, it's probably going to give me an error message and say, hey, your background isn't consistent enough for us to try to do it automatically. Let's see. Yeah, see right here. It says, couldn't remove the background automatically, try a larger segment size. So that's where we would turn that segment size up. And that's why whenever I start in mask, I always go to that segment view first and adjust the segment size based on the image. Now, if I click remove background, it would probably work just fine. There we go, just like that.
Excellent. Great little tip.
All right, let me see. Where are we at? We got about 15 minutes left.
And very quickly, a lot of people are asking, will this be recorded? Yeah, we are recording it. You will be able to view it later. Again, this will end up in our archived webinars page.
All right, so the next thing we want to talk about is we showed you a little bit how to use a mask that you send into a plugin, which is great when you have a really complex thing to work with. But inside of something like Perfect Effects, you can actually create masks using either the masking brush or the masking bug, and you can propagate those masks to multiple effects layers. That sounded really fancy. Let me show you what I mean by it. Let's go in and let's find an image to work on. Here we go. I'm going to, actually before we send this to effects, I'm just going to use the retouch brush to get rid of a couple little dust bunnies here. There we go. Now I'm going to send it to effects. And what I want to do in effects is I want to make the background blue, and I want to keep my bride on the couch looking the way she does, or maybe add a little bit of a glow to her as well. So here's what we're going to do. First thing I need to do is I need to add blue to the image. I'll go to the search field and I'll type in blue. There we go. Now here's a really cool tip about the Quick View browser. You can always use the Quick View browser just to look at your search results. So as I've typed in blue, see how it's created this category called search results, and it's got a dozen effects in it. I can click the Quick View browser button and I can now see larger versions of just the stuff that I searched for to help me find the one that I want. There we go. So give yourself a point if you knew that you could use the Quick View browser to look at search results. Now I'm going to click on the cross-process blue. That's one that I want to add. It's added this cool electric blue to the wall, but it's also blued up the bride. So we need to paint that off. I'll just use the Perfect brush. This is a great case for that. And now all I do is I just start to paint over her, and it will automatically paint that away. Notice I'm kind of just outlining it first. I care about the border, and then I can come back and clean up the inside in just a minute. And I can turn the Perfect brush off to do the inside. A handy thing to do is to turn on that red mask view while I'm painting so I can see exactly what my mask is looking like. So this will help me find and clean up those flaws while I'm painting in real time. Now if I had to do this with a normal brush, this would take forever, but the Perfect brush makes it a ton faster to clean this up. Now, if I make a little mistake like I did right there, see how I got outside on the background? Just move your brush outside, hold down the Option key. Remember that temporarily toggles the tool mode, and then just paint that little mistake away. Again, make a mistake, Option key, paint it back out, just like that. I can toggle my Perfect brush off to fill in all the stuff in the middle. There we go. And after a minute or so of painting, I've got a fairly decent mask. Doesn't have to be 100% perfect for this. Clean up that little spot on the foreground. All right, let's turn that mask view off now. We'll go back to just our after view. And if we turn the preview on or off, right down here, that little check mark at the bottom, you can also use your Control P or Command P keyboard shortcut to turn the preview on or off. You can see how I've added the blue to the wall, but I haven't really added it to her. Now, making that mask took me a minute to do, and it's really handy to hold on to that mask so I can use it again with other effect layers. To do that, on the effect layer that has the mask that you want, go up to the mask menu and say copy mask. That now loads that mask into the clipboard, and I can use it on the next layer. So let's say I want to add another effect on top of this, and let's do some sort of a texture this time. Let's go down to our textures, texture walls. Let's use the quick view browser, make it easy to find one we want to apply. Let's use this screen door texture. There we go. We don't want that screen door texture to be applied over our bride. So watch, we just go to mask and we say paste mask. And voila, it uses the mask from that layer so that she's protected again. I didn't have to do anything. How cool is that? Let's adjust how strong that is. I'm going to add another layer. This time I want to add an effect that only affects her. So we can do the same thing by pasting the mask and then flipping the mask around. I want to add some warmth here. So I'm just going to type in warm to my search field. I'll bring up the quick view browser until we find something that has a little bit of warmth to it. Let's see. Let's just do kind of a fun warmth here. Let's use the warm highlights. This will add just a bit of warmth to the highlights. Now it's added to the whole image. I don't want that on my background, so we'll go to Mask, Paste Mask, and then I want to flip the mask around so the mask is protecting the wall instead of protecting her. So I go to Mask and we say Invert Mask, and voila. Now that warm highlights is only getting applied to her instead of the wall. And if we look at the mask for that, you see how the mask is the opposite of what it was in the past. All right, so that's how you can copy and paste masks to multiple effect layers inside of Perfect Effects. All right, any questions on that?
No, looking pretty good, but masking does seem to be the hot topic here. People are wondering about more advanced techniques. What happens when you don't have a background that's quite as nice? That definitely looks like a webinar in and of itself here from the comments.
Yep, and there's lots of tutorials on our website that deal with that, with using Perfect Mask. And when you do have a complex masking task, that's where you would go to Perfect Mask to do it instead of using the Perfect Brush.
Excellent. Lots of great comments too. Fantastic tips. Learning great stuff. Awesome. So,
cool. All
really
right.
cool.
I think I have time for 2 more tips here to show you. Let's go ahead. I'm just going to cancel out of here. And let's go back. Let's grab, this image will do. I want to talk about looking at the histogram and understanding clipping. This is another new feature that we kind of snuck in that a lot of people probably haven't found yet. Over here in the Navigator panel, the Navigator is more than just a navigator. It's also a loop tool, which allows you to zoom in and look at a portion of the image without having to zoom in. And if you use the keep and drop eyedropper tools in Mask, if you like to use the old school magic brush, using the loop tool, you can see the exact colors that you're clicking on to select without having to zoom in to 200 or 300% on your image. But there's also a histogram pane, which gives you a histogram of your image. For those of you who don't know what histogram is, it's a way to look at the overall lightness and darkness of the image. And what it can tell you is that the left-hand side is the shadows and the right-hand side is the highlights. If the image goes all the way to both edges, you have what's called clipping. That means that there's a significant portion of the image that is all black. That's not a bad thing depending on the image. An image like this that's shot at night, we actually want to have some all black in it. And we'll probably also want a small percentage of all white. If you don't have any whites or any blacks in your image would be what we call flat. It lacks contrast. If you have too much whites and blacks, that's a key that you're losing details in your highlights or in your shadows. What this tool can do is it visually tells you that. We also add a tool on top of that called the clipping view. You notice there's two little triangles here in the top corners. When they light up, that means you have clipping in either the shadows or the highlights. You can click on this and it'll turn clipping view on. Anything that appears in this solid blue color is all the way black. Anything that appears in red will be pure white. This image actually doesn't have any pure white in it yet. Let's go ahead. I'm going to go to black and white. And we'll take a look at this again. Let's turn that clipping view back on. So anything that is black is pure black. Now, for me, for a night shot, that's actually not enough black. I want more black than that. So I'll go to my blacks slider. And as I bring that up, you'll see how I get more and more blue. So I can control the exact amount of black that I want in my image. I can do the same thing with whites. I don't have any real white in my image. If I bring this white slider up, you'll see the stuff that starts to glow red are all now pure white. So I want to bring that up until I start to get just a little bit of pure white in there. There we go. Let's turn that clipping view off, and we can see how we've now adjusted the black and white contrast range of the image. We've made it have a bit more contrast. Oops, I guess I can't show you that way. Let's go like this. So there's our before, and then our after, like that. So that's how you can view the black and white clipping of your image. And it's really important as you're making adjustments to the tonality of the image, if you're working in perfect black and white or perfect effects and you're adjusting the brightness or the contrast, that you look at this histogram and you turn that clipping view on so you can understand what's happening. And even other tools like detail, things that adjust the local contrast, can have effect on that. So if I was to grab my detail slider and watch as I turn this up, you can see how by increasing the contrast, we're also going to cause it to clip more. So it lets you see what's going on. All right, so that is clipping view. Any questions there, Johnny?
Lots of great comments, though. Fastest hour ever. Best webinar ever. So lots of great stuff, Dan. Thank you.
Good. The last thing I want to show you guys, and this is for Photoshop users, how to actually record an action that uses a plugin of the suite. So you can create your own actions, and it's also really handy if you wanted to do batch processing through Photoshop's batch dialog. So I'm just going to cancel out of here, and let's quit the suite. And I'm just going to launch Photoshop here. And let me go open an image up. There we go. We'll use this one. There we go. So you can record an action. And an action is, think of it like a macro if you're used to like Microsoft Word or something like that. It allows you to record a series of steps and then play them back over and over again. And if you have certain effects that you like to use and you're a Photoshop user, you can create an action for that effect and then apply it with a single keyboard shortcut. Or you can use it to batch process. So let's say there's a certain effect that I like to use in perfect black and white all the time, and I want to be able to record it and use it over and over again. The first thing I want to do is I want to open up my actions palette here in Photoshop. Let me close some of these junk up here and get them out of the way. And I want to start by creating a new action set. So I'm going to click on the new folder right here. This will create a new set, and I'm just going to call it, I'll call it my set. You'll call it whatever makes sense for you. Or if you already have an existing set and you're an actions user, you can always just create a new action inside of it. But the set is kind of where actions live. You need to have one set selected. Then click on the new action button, and this starts the recording process. I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it, let's call it minor, because that's the one that I like to use a lot. So I'll call it my minor, because I'm going to make an adjustment to it, and I'll hit record. So now Photoshop is recording everything that I do inside of Photoshop, and if I go out to a plugin like the Perfect Photo Suite from Photoshop, it will remember the stuff that I do in there. So now I just need to launch Perfect Black and White. Now, here's a tip for you. You can't do it through the onOne panel. The onOne panel runs in Flash, and it's like its own little operating system, and anything you do through the onOne panel doesn't get recorded into an action. It's kind of a limitation of those extension panel technologies. So if you want to record an action, you got to go through File and Automate. And now we'll pick Perfect Black and White. It will go and take our image, puts it into perfect black and white. We'll go pick the preset that I wanted to use. The one I like is called Minor. It kind of looks like the warm infrared stuff from Minor White, but I want to change the film grain so that it doesn't have any. So I'm going to turn that film grain off. So now I've made kind of my version of that I can use. Maybe let's make another little change too. Let's say that I tend to like touch more contrast to it. So let's bring my contrast up about 10 or 15. There we go. Now when I hit apply, it's going to remember all of the settings that I had in this right-hand pane, and it's going to write that into that action so that I can use it over and over again. What it won't remember is anything that I do with a brush. So if I use a brush to paint something in or paint something out, that kind of thing won't get recorded in an action. It'll only be the actual things you can do with sliders. So there we go. I've recorded that, and now I hit the stop button. Or if there's more stuff that I wanted to do in Photoshop, I can add any Photoshop stuff on top of this as well. I'll hit the stop button, and if we look right here, there's my action I created called My Minor, and inside of it, it goes to perfect black and white. I'm just going to throw this layer away, and we'll play it back and make sure that it works. So all I do is I select the action that I want, I hit the play button, and it will now replay those things. So now it'll take that image, it'll send it off to perfect black and white, it'll load the settings that I recorded into the action, it'll apply it, and take me back to Photoshop. There we go. And as an action option, so I can click on this, I can then go up here. Oops, wrong button, sorry. Once I have an action selected, I can go to action. Oops, sorry. Went to history on accident there. Where is it? I'm trying to remember where you do it now. You could actually assign a keyboard shortcut to this as well. It's not in playback options, is it? No. I've forgotten where the heck you do it at. I feel bad. I'm sorry, I forgot where you actually do that. It should be under action. Oh, sorry, I wasn't actually on the action. I was on an item within the action. There we go. Now you go to action options, and you can set a keyboard shortcut for that. So let's say that I want it to, when I do Command Shift F8, it'll automatically play that action for me. So let's throw that away. And now if I do Command Shift F8 on my computer, it'll fire off that action automatically and goes and does that work for me. And you could also take that action and you can use the batch dialog inside of Photoshop to batch process a whole group of images with the same thing that you've recorded into an action. You go to File, go to Automate, and select Batch. You can pick the action you want to use. You can set a folder of images you want to work on, and then control where they go. And it will then open each image that you tell it to, apply the action that you tell it to, and then saves it with the name and where you tell it to save to. There's lots of videos online to teach you how to use this batch dialog as well. All right, I think we are out of time. Johnny, any last minute questions?
No, that looks great. Comments from all around the globe. Great webinar, fabulous. One of the best webinars I've seen. So Dan, I'd like to thank you for giving us your time this morning, and everybody for tuning in. There are some questions that didn't get answered to. If you are having problems with any of our products, send us an email. You can contact us, customer service or technical support. We'd be more than happy to provide you with answers to your questions. Again, we've got a lot of people here, and the questions just keep streaming. So lots of great thanks to you. Dan, if you want to bring up our webpage here, I want to show you how you can get to the great learning resources that we have posted on the website. You know, we've got tons of training tutorials, as well as recorded webinars. So we did record this. It will be up rather quickly. So if you go to the Learn page on our website, go to the recorded demos there. This is where you're going to be able to tune back into this webinar that we did record. Might take a couple days to get up there, but we will get it up there ASAP. And you can see we've got lots of great webinars, really in-depth, and as well on that Learn page you can get more bite-sized, quick getting started tutorials as well. So again, we'd like to thank you for joining us this morning wherever you find yourself. We hope you have an absolutely wonderful evening, morning, day, wherever it is. Any parting comments there, Dan?
Nope, just thanks for having me, and I hope this was helpful for everybody. If you're interested to see what we're working on for the future here at onOne Software, go to the onOne Labs website, which is just labs.ononesoftware.com. You can get a sneak peek of some of the technologies that we're working on for future products. And we'd love to get your feedback on those to make sure we're building the right stuff for you guys.
Excellent. Again, thanks everybody. We're signing off. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Bye-bye.